Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Primal Season 2. Now, this is a full Season 2. I think last time it felt like there was a Season 2, but it was just half of Season 1. This is a full, proper season of 10 episodes, actually aired 10 weeks in order, instead of taking a break halfway between. Primal continues to be one of the most savagely violent, destructive forces of nature in animation that almost feels unreal to even exist at the masterpiece level it is. We're getting Genndy Tartakovsky at big auteur levels, which frankly he should have been at a while ago, but he's there now, and letting him just kind of go off and make a show that is probably the most pure animation I can think of right now. There's very little dialogue, and if there is, it's usually in a language I don't understand. There's a poetry to the animation. There's a rich experimental quality to the animation. Like, the visuals in this are just so alive. Like, there's no episode where I'm not seeing a different location, a different kind of person, a different idea. As much as there's, violence and gore and dinosaurs and all this crazy shit, it almost like assaults you as a viewer, because it will never not compel you in terms of what it's doing. And it is daring. Like, we live in a time where everything is done, most things are done through dialogue, not visuals. If you mute some of your favorite movies that are current, a lot of them would not make any fucking sense. Primal doesn't need the soundtrack, but fuck, that soundtrack makes it even better. It is pure filmmaking. It is pure cinema. I don't know. It's probably one of the most, if not the most cinematic thing I've seen this year, as were the other batches of episodes. I always usually put it, if I can make a top 10 list. If I do this year, this will definitely 100% be on it. If I don't, you can just say, well, if he did, it would have been on it. And this is that much of an impactful, amazing show. I just can't let go of how amazing this is. If you're not watching this show, I guess you just don't like good things, but also, it's just the greatest action sequences going right now. Like, when I watch even clips of the new Game of Thrones, that looks like a fucking joke to me in comparison to what this is accomplishing. Amazon can spend $1 billion over here, whatever. Primal is so alive in those action sequences. It's kind of gross, almost. It's like an embarrassment of riches in animation and filmmaking. So this season was a little different. It is different from the last season, because the last season is sort of isolated episodes. Sometimes, or there's something that happened in the previous episode that would impact the following episode, but not a lot of them were a continuing story. But in the last episode of the first season, we introduced the character of Mira, who washes up on their beach and all this stuff, and he falls in love with her. She gets kidnapped at the end and sent back to be a slave again, and so Fang and Spear have to go and try to find her. And so you have them finding her, which is a block of episodes. They have her at the Viking village, and they rescue her. And then you have when they're all kidnapped in the Colossus 3-parter, which is also insane. And then the kind of last one that sort of wraps up the thing from the Viking village. I was surprised how well this worked, because it is very different from season 1. I plot-wise, in terms of a continuing story, I was surprised how well it worked, and I was not super thrilled about that. I was like, oh man, I liked Primal being what it was. I don't know if I want change. It was so good at what it was, but it managed to get all of that to work in such a way that I shouldn't have. In Genndy we trust, I guess, but it showed how they don't really almost care about what makes sense or what's a format or anything. If any of this is historically accurate, one, I don't care, and two, I guess it's just I don't care. It was a long time ago. How the fuck do we even know? It doesn't matter. But I think that's the thing with it is they don't seem to care about that. They just want to artistically do what they want, and there's something breathtaking about that, and especially the way you do it. My personal favorite, I will say, is the first episode of this season, Sea of Despair. And one of the reasons for that was, and I've watched it a couple times, just the idea of you don't know what's going to come out of that ocean, but it has such a interesting flow to it. It's should they go out? They do. When they do, you see those glow in the dark, when they're in the darkness on the little ship, they play with that black in such a way, first you see these glow in the dark kind of jellyfish and stuff like that, and that's scary and enticing, but then at the same time they break from what you understand of the Black Sea, basically, and you see like whales come up. Now, wouldn't you be able to see under the whale since you just saw the jellyfish? Like, the rules don't necessarily make sense, but it makes sense about how adventurous and how new worldly the ocean could feel at that time. Not that I would know, but you know what I mean. It's just like the idea of like the open wilderness of the ocean then, and like how just the shark coming out and just everything. It just felt like anything could be thrown at you, but under the guise of this is the ocean. There could be anything can kill you at any time, which is probably definitely still true. I've talked to people who like were on ships and stuff, and they always say like, one night I saw this thing glowing. I don't know what it was. I don't know what's going on, but they all like were entranced with the ocean, and I felt that in Sea of Despair. I did like everything with Mira, and like the thing with Red and Fang I thought was actually really interesting, seeing Spear actually make friends with another human for once that isn't Mira, and have a plot that like similar to the Northmen a bit. I do think if you like the Northmen, you should see Primal, and if you like Primal, you should see the Northmen. I think that's, I think David Edgar should watch Primal. I think Gendy's probably already watched the Northland. That's my estimation of it. But similar to that, but I think done in a different way. It's cool. This had more dinosaurs than Northman did, though. But I always like a good like freeing slaves movie. Not really super into people being slaves. So them being freed, and like even I guess it was a little sympathetic to the Vikings, but not too much because they had slaves, so fuck them. That's, But the one I think that's most controversial, if there is one, would be the Primal theory, where it's kind of like not an episode of Primal, but it's not trying to be an episode of Primal because it is a bunch of English dudes talking about how, all of us, if we were put in the right case, we could have that primal instinct like cavemen and stuff, which I do think is actually true to a certain extent. I do think that is an interesting, like, almost critique of like almost the murder mystery. However they wrote that, they clearly know the format and the genre and the structure of those things. But I think when you look at those sort of things and how most people take on TV and stuff like that, it's this kind of high art, high drama, intelligent speaking, philosophizing kind of thing. Like, you even look at like a show like Game of Thrones, it's a lot of that shit. It's not a lot of dinosaurs fighting people or fighting in general or being a halfway decent show. But what I did feel like it was almost a criticism of that, and then like throwing an idea of like an escaped mental patient who like maybe he's like a long, Spear is his great times 100 grandfather or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, probably not. It did feel like, Genndy Tarkovsky Presents, which that would be a great show, to be honest with you. I didn't mind him just sort of going off in that, but it felt like the idea of like having this kind of almost savage show live with a murder mystery, which is maybe something like nobody was like, what we need to take down the murder mystery with Primal, like that. I don't think anyone was asking for it, but I found it an interesting juxtaposition, certainly. Yeah, you could probably not have it in the season. I'm curious if you watched the Red Mist and then Vitor right next to each other and left out Primal Theory. Would that work better, even though that's not how it was intended? I've actually thought about possibly doing that and then just coming back to the Primal Theory like at the end or something. I don't think it has any plot threads or anything like that work out there. It was interesting when I get to the 6th episode. I think it might just be my own incompetence that I thought that was the whole season or something like that. But the Colosseus part or 3-parter was, whoa, that was insane. Some of the violent, like them Spear and Fang like attacking kingdoms and like doing what they do with that giant, and like how these people were kept as slaves and everything like that, and kind of weird society. I like their kind of strange, weird cultures. You're like, that looks like something maybe, and they just sort of like go with it, and you're kind of in this world and you're not sure how any of it makes sense. There's a certain sense of bizarre and almost predictableness that of course humanity would do that, but just the idea that those things were always going on And, you have someone who's as almost free as Spear and Fang, but understand it's still as brutal as just being like stuck in the wilderness with a bunch of dinosaurs, being in those kind of situations, like how it was always just kind of brutal at that time. And that's something I think that goes throughout the whole show, the idea of life and death and how quickly that can change, because, you might be Spear and Fang's food one night, like they have like that fight with the turtle, Jesus, and that the first one, but you might be their food one night, but you might end up trying to eat them a different night. And it's just like this always idea of survival and eat or be eaten that goes throughout all of it. But of course, that's what's going to happen at the time. And I think that's sort of the appeal, to me at least, is like you never know what's going to be around the corner. There are constantly things hitting you and hitting you. Almost makes it like far more unpredictable, because you never know exactly what is going to hit these characters, and they never know, but they're ready for anything that's going to happen, and they're ready to fight to the death, which I think is whoa. This is very influenced by Frank Frazetta, as well as Korgoth. I think if Korgoth is almost Frank Frazetta from a young man's perspective, and Primal is Frank Frazetta from a grown man's perspective. I do think there's a sort of maturity to it, the idea of loss that goes on throughout it, the idea of what you are fighting for, which is kind of almost instinctual. You understand, like, he loves Mira. You understand that Fang is going to fall in love with Red and have Red's babies. You understand the cycle of life and, like, how things are passed on and what is important to people and what you should fight for the next generation, at the same time keeping yourself alive. All of that is in here. It feels like a layered text, but there's nothing being said. I think maybe that is what Primal Theory was kind of saying, is like it solves its theories with visuals. It solves its theory while understanding visually how to represent these problems simply. And I think when I'm watching this show, like, what is far more impactful? What is more intelligent? Is it more intelligent for me to sit here and explain the theory with my words, or is it more intelligent to, animate an entire sequence, figure out how the design works, figure out how the music works, figure out how the sound effects works, to hit you with this intensely collaborative visual and auditory feast? Or is it better if I just like explain the Primal Theory? Who can say? Overall, I don't know if there'll be more of this show. It's won so many Emmys. I think it deserves even more acclaim. It is definitely going to go down as one of the greatest things Genndy Tartakovsky's ever done. Will it be the greatest? I don't know. But I do think it is something showing the absolute power of a great animator. And if anything, I don't know what's going to become of what else he's working on, or what's going on with HBO Max, or Primal will be taken out tomorrow. But it is absolutely one of the greatest things to happen in this last couple bunch of years, and both for animation, for cinema, for everything. Like, I would love to go to a screening of all of these. It's just such, oh god, I just love this fucking show. It is just, I don't know how people are freaking out about, like, how could they keep doing this, and like, I don't think there's a single episode I don't like. It's just, maybe Primal Theory is like this weird offshoot, but it's still interesting and thought-provoking. Like, this is true art form at such a magnificent level. I think it shows the power of Genndy as a filmmaker and as an animator. It shows the power of animation, It shows the power of what animation can do if left by itself, its own creative free will out there. It's not trying to be anything other than itself, but it also wants to redefine itself in any way it can. If this is it for Spear and Fang, it's been a wonderful journey. I didn't feel like the ending was rushed. I feel like the ending makes sense in the end. That's just how life is, and especially in this universe. I love this show. I do think it might be one of the greatest things made this year. It's probably the best TV show going on right now, and it has the greatest action sequences. I do think we are underappreciating probably one of the most significant pieces of art that is going on a streaming service or on a TV network currently. And when it's over, I'm just happy I got to live through it and experience it, and be present for when it came out. It does feel to me like watching a major movement, a real master in his craft. I don't know if it'll influence anything, and frankly, I don't care. I'm just happy that it exists, and I think Primal is much like the characters are happy to continue to exist, just to see and be entered into this fantastical prehistoric world and just sort of not being able to get out of it because you don't want to, because there's just so many surprises and beautiful visuals going on. I think Gendy is probably the great animator of our time, and I think Primal could go down as maybe one of his greatest expressions, and I'm happy to have been able to see it. So if you have seen Primal Season 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.